I believe the teenage term for it is OMG. OnePlus have done it again, at least in terms of value. We'll have to see if the logistics are better this time round. The OnePlus 2 is here, starting at $329, so that's about £180 in the UK for, get this, a Snapdragon 810 4GB of RAM and up to 64GB of built-in storage, a magnesium frame around a 5.5-inch 1080p screen, 13-megapixel camera with OIS and laser focus, 4K video capture, fingerprint sensor, a 3300 mAh sealed battery and USB Type-C connectivity. That's a very good spec for the money, though apparently there's no NFC. What? No instant pairings or payment possibilities? And my usual concerns over the speaker will no doubt apply. I'll borrow one in August, I think. Over to Motorola for a bevy of new hardware. The Moto X Style is a flagship with a 5.7-inch QHD display, think just sub Nexus 6, with twin front-facing speakers, a Snapdragon 808 chipset, 3GB of RAM, and it comes in 3 storage options, plus microSD, thankfully. Imaging has been bumped up in resolution to 21 megapixels and phase detection autofocus, plus dual-colour LED flash. The battery's sealed, of course, this design being time-tested by Motorola at 3000 mAh and quick charge is supported. There are a variety of back finish options, including rubber, leather and wood. LG, eat your heart out. The Moto X Play is slightly smaller and lower spec at 5.5-inch 1080p with a Snapdragon 615 chipset and 2GB of RAM. The same 21-megapixel camera is used though, and best of all is a 3630 mAh battery, which should mean 2 days of normal use per charge. Finally, the ubiquitous and often confusingly ranged Moto G now has a 3rd-gen edition, available with 2GB of RAM and 16GB of storage at last. My Nexus 6 Lite has had an upgrade. Though this being Motorola, of course there's a 1GB, 8GB version as well, just to confuse everyone. Plus microSD expansion, the same 720p display, and the chipset's a Snapdragon 410. The camera is now 13 megapixel, there's dual LED flash, and the battery's bumped up to 2470 mAh. Plus Motorola has added certification to signify protection if dropped into a metre of water for up to 30 minutes. And now for something completely different. As a fan of music quality and volume, see it's not just camera phones, I was intrigued by the new Marshall London with high-end Wolfson WM8281 music chipset including FLAC compatibility, analog volume control, 2 insanely loud front-facing speakers, stereo high-amplitude recording, and even 2 headphone jacks for you to share favourite moments with a partner. It comes with a system-wide audio equaliser and a handful of useful audio applications. Things are less impressive on the smartphone side, of course, with a standard 4.7-inch 720p display, 8-megapixel camera and Snapdragon 410 chipset, but you do get 2GB of RAM and 16GB of storage, plus microSD, plus a large removable battery, and a standalone battery charger, apparently. As the battery logo states, long live rock and roll, and I'll have this for review when it ships towards the end of August. Now, what if you were in charge of designing the best Android smartphone in terms of specs and value? I bet you'd end up something along these lines. A 5.5-inch screen, high quality, 1080p LCD, full RGB, 2GB of RAM to make sure Android has room to breathe, put in a Snapdragon 615 or above at the very least, and a 4G chipset. Stick in 16GB of internal storage, again more room for Android to stretch out, plus microSD. Make sure it has the Android controls the right way around, back on the left, Nexus style. Stick in a 13 megapixel camera minimum and 5 megapixel selfie camera. Stick in a 3000 mAh battery to make sure it lasts even on a heavy day. Put it out at £125 all in the UK. And watch jaws drop. This is exactly what Vodafone has done here in the Smart Ultra 6, a tweaked version of the ZTE S6 Plus. So consider this a joint review of that beast as well. Though me being me, there are some caveats to look out for. You can't fault the overall package though, which is right on the limit of one-handed use, but it will please a lot of people for whom this is their first large screen smartphone. The capacitive controls pulse in blue in a very cool way. The screen is really rather good in most light conditions, and the value for money proposition is off the chart. Of course, this being a Vodafone handset, it's locked to their network and would need unlocking if you wanted to use it elsewhere, a hassle not everyone wants to go through. Credit to Vodafone though for not including masses of bloatware. Each of the included Vodafone widgets and applications here can be uninstalled. leaving you, if needed, with a stock Android Nexus-like experience. Even the pucker, seemingly hardwired version of Flipboard here, off to the left of the main home screens, can be uninstalled. But hey, it's nice to have, so I would recommend keeping it. As an Android powerhouse for not very much money, the Smart Ultra 6 fares pretty darn well. The Snapdragon 615 and Adreno 306 GPU struggle a little in some demanding games, but bear in mind that this was the processor in the Galaxy S4, which still works perfectly in my family. It's only when you look at particular design and component aspects that any flaws really become apparent. The overall design is beautifully boring, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The curves are comfortable to hold, though it's all plastic and unashamedly so. Ridges on the sides indicate the back might come off, but it doesn't. It's just a seam in the construction. The front actually does come off. The glass on the review Smart Ultra 6 had popped out, and I had to pop it back in. Oops. And it's not Gorilla Glass, so it might be more susceptible to day-to-day scratches. The 13 megapixel camera here is disappointing, often overexposing, especially in HDR mode, which is unforgivable, though presumably fixable in software, and with the usual blurry indoor photos and unusable night shots. Clearly the very cheaper sensors have been used here. Meanwhile, the mono speaker on the back is, well, here's a demo. This is full volume. It's loud enough, but it's all rather thin and unsatisfying. However, do take all of this with a pinch of salt. Set everything against the context of the price. An Android phablet with 1080p screen, 2 gig of RAM for £125 is very tempting for anyone who's not too fussy over raw camera quality in particular. With Motorola raising the bar for value in the last few years, with the likes of Huawei and Xiaomi pitching in as well, the days of having to pay £500 plus for a mature, future-proof Android smartphone are well and truly over, and the Smart Ultra 6 here fits in with this new way of thinking. It may not suit the uber tech fans watching this show, but when your teenage son or daughter wants an upgrade from their current Samsung Galaxy Ace or whatever, and assuming that you're okay with Vodafone or are prepared to unlock, then add the Smart Ultra 6 to the list of smartphones to check out.